Jesse, I know that you're aware that there's a great deal of concern, unhappiness, and even anger in the city about the cost of the Department of Watershed Development's $4 billion capital improvement program that was jump-started by Mayor Franklin when she came into office, faced with 2 federal consent decrees, increasing fines from sewer spills, a failure to have kept up with the rapid growth of the community, and with the necessary maintenance to keep the system properly operational. The department, really from a standing start, over the last 7 years has accomplished a great deal. They've finished the 2007 consent decree and they have substantially reduced those fines. However, where that leaves us today is that the ratepayers are paying the highest rates of any of the 15 major water system ratepayers in the country, with 2 additional significant increase in rates staring us in the face over the next couple of years. That's in addition to Atlanta taxpayers paying a 1% local tax in order to hold the rates down. Looking forward, when the next mayor is responsible in the 2010 to 14 program that's upcoming, the expectation is, from the program that's been approved, that there's going to be another $1.5 billion of borrowing with payback that goes out into the 2040s, in a situation where about 1/3 of watershed management's present costs are in paying down bonds over time, and that's going to get worse. The auditors recently opined that the just completed raise in rates and the next 2 are probably excessive to the actual needs of the department over time. The department, Watershed Management Department, strongly disagrees with that position. The audit, at least as I read it, also never addressed the projects that are projected over this next 5-year period of time and what their real requirements are. When you become mayor, along with the myriad of other things that you're going to have to face, what are you going to do in order to convince yourself that we have a proper program and that with what needs to be the program, we minimize the additional cost to the ratepayer?
Well, when the auditors did the review of the department, they did some alternative scenarios that came up with different numbers in terms of how much revenue would be generated, and also looking at the projects that are to be undertaken, whether or not we needed as much money as the city is now collecting. And it found that perhaps an 8% increase and a 10% increase as opposed to the 12.5% increase would be enough. But there is a capital improvement program that's prepared annually on a 5-year rolling basis, where each department is responsible for preparing its capital program for the current year and for a 5-year period. That would have to be done by Department of Watershed Management as well on a each annual 5-year rolling basis. That plan is to be reviewed by Department of Planning and Development to make sure that it's in compliance with the Comprehensive Development Plan. And in addition to that, the Finance Department must review it to make sure that we have appropriate funding sources. The check on making sure that the Department of Watershed Management is doing what it's supposed to do, and no more than it's supposed to do, is to review that capital improvements program on an annual basis and to make sure that it's being vetted by the outside parties like Planning and Development and the Finance Department. But you must also, though, make sure that you've got the right people in the right positions. One of the issues that was developed by that audit is that even when it comes to implementing programs, most of the work that's being done is being outsourced by the Department of Watershed Management, even the initial costing for the projects. There's no responsibility really from beginning to end for project delivery. If we can address those type issues and make sure that we got responsible people in place within the department to do the costing, to do the estimation that needs to be done with respect to the cost, I think that we'll go a long way in making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and no more than what they're supposed to be doing, especially with the overlay of the capital improvements program that will be reviewed by outside parties.
Perhaps one of the concerns is a lack of understanding on the part of the of Atlantans on what the real requirements are, why they're required. And this is a very complex program. So once you get all of that under control, how do you then convince the citizenry that we've got the right program in place?
With transparency. My notion of how you run the city, as I mentioned, was to have the best ideas submitted, vetted by the best minds, and then you select the best ones in the best interest of the city. Not just to tell the residents and the taxpayers, ratepayers what, but also why. And if you include them from the beginning in terms of how you're developing those capital improvement programs, if you explain to them and have their input with respect to what you're going to do, I think that there'd be no problem with people signing on to that. I think that a lot of the problem that people have today is not with what's been done, is that they don't feel they're getting fair value for their money. They don't know enough about what's going on. And we hear stories about assets being allocated or misallocated in a less than optimal way, and it makes people suspicious of the system. I think it's a lack of knowledge and involvement and input and a sense of a lack of responsiveness that causes people to distrust. And if you can create the transparency that would be in my administration, you'd go a long way in eliminating a lot of that distrust and discomfort. And there'd be the opportunity to review, trust but verify. I would ask the residents, the ratepayers to trust me, but I would also give them the opportunity to verify what's actually being done by the department.
Gotcha. Thank you. I'm going to shift gears but stick with water. This past Friday, a federal judge down in Florida issued a ruling that basically says that the metropolitan area is not entitled to any but incidental water out of Lake Lanier and the Chattahoochee River. That's an amount that's about half of what the city is drawing now, or the region is drawing now, much less the projected growth of the system. That'll get appealed. Lord knows where that goes. But the judge gave us 3 years to get Congress to change the rules to allow for an increase in the amount of water. If you looked ahead to being the mayor during the next 4 years, what type of an impact do you think that this would have on your administration of a city as it pertains to water in an environment where, at least in my view, the city and the mayor have stayed away from the issue and left it to the ARC and the state?
Well, Atlanta is fast becoming a part of a mega region. What has been anticipated would be 11 mega regions in the country. And I expect the mayor and the city of Atlanta to lead the mega region for this area. The mayor cannot stay disengaged from that process. As I mentioned to you previously, Atlanta's problems, many of them go beyond our boundaries. We can't solve them by ourselves. It's going to call for tremendous cooperation and collaboration among various parties. With that 3-year window, of course, we would do everything we could, and I would lead the charge to persuade Congress to change the law in the way that would get us the water resources or the allocation of water that we'd want from those two sources. But I'd also work with the state to make sure that we'd build the reservoirs that we need to be building to collect the water that would lessen the need from those sources. But Atlanta cannot ignore that process because we are the economic engine of this region. And we will be the leader in one of the 11 mega regions in this country. And I would expect as mayor to lead that charge at both the state and the federal level.
Think you could get involved in the process of the 3 states that'll have to bring their representatives together in order for Congress to take any action?
That's a process that's being handled by the governor and the lawyers for the state. In terms of being a cheerleader for the governor and having my input, I would not presume to usurp the power of the governor in those negotiations, but I would certainly be there for my insight, to help in any way that I can, to make sure that they're successful in those negotiations.